everybody, and welcome to today's video. We are taking a look at a new visual novel that has just been released on Nintendo Switch today, Aokana, which comes to us from P-Cube. It's a romantic semi-comedy, semi-sci-fi, semi-sports story, and I will have a full review of it up on digitallydownloaded.net around this time as I publish this video. Long story short though, I really like it. I think it is a gorgeous little thing. Rather than talk about the game itself for this video though, since I'm covering it in my review, I wanted to talk about something that is frequently controversial for visual novel ports to console. Aokana on PC is very much an adult game. It's got some incredibly lurid sex scenes, even by the genre's standards. Aokana on console, however, hasn't got those sex scenes because console platform holders don't allow adults-only material on them. It's by no means the only game that has done this. In fact, there are quite a lot of them on Switch. For example, Troubled Days, If My Heart Had Wings, Neko Para, Mai Tetsu. These are all adult visual novels that went legit on Switch by removing the sex content. The question is, though, are these edited games inferior as a result? That's where the controversy comes in. Are they missing something that is important to the experience? A lot of people do default to the position that they are inherently inferior, but I think there's a little bit more nuance to that, and that's what I want to explore through this video. So the thing about sex scenes is that they add a certain aesthetic and tone to an overall game and experience. Sometimes that is something that you do want in there as a storyteller, and I always come back to this as the great example of that. Consider Sayo no Uta on the PC. That particular game most certainly needs the sex scenes that it has, because that is a core theme to the game, and without those scenes, the game loses a lot of its thematic and creative value and impact. It is just not the same game. In other cases, though, I am left wondering if the sex scenes actually add to the experience, or if anything, they're a detriment to it. The most clear example of that for me is the Neko Para games, which, as I mentioned before, do have a all ages of sorts version on the Nintendo Switch. There's a charming lightness and playfulness to the bulk of Neko Para which kind of suits with the catgirl aesthetic, and that is tonally at odds with the sex scenes in the R18 version. As a result, those scenes do come across as jarring and tonally inconsistent with the rest of the narrative and experience. They do feel like they're there actually cynically, because while they don't add to the narrative themes or experience, they do something that improves the commercial value of the game to a specific audience. It is there, it does seem like it's there purely as a commercial consideration and a chance to make some money from the crowd that are into those kinds of games. And so I do think that the Neko Para games fit better on Switch without that stuff in them, where they can be light and bubbly without the tonal contrast of those R18 scenes to compromise the overall narrative. Which brings us to Aokana. The R18 Plus version of Aokana certainly has some pretty vivid imagery removed from it if you want to Google search it up. And so the cuts that have been made to the Nintendo Switch version of this game actually are quite significant in terms of what has been removed. The question is whether this is a case of a game that would have been better off never having released on the console at all, or whether the removed material did nothing to enhance the base narrative, or even compromised it, like is what happened with Neko Para and the R18 version of that game. It's a difficult one. On the one hand, there is a strong streak of romance that runs through the narrative, and sex is a natural consequence of that. On the other hand, the depiction of the sex doesn't really build on the themes, and you have no difficulty understanding that the protagonist is getting closer and eventually romantically involved with one of the girls in the game if you play the version that has that material removed from it. That would suggest that the sex scenes don't actually add anything to the game other than as pure titillation, but outside of the presence of those scenes, Aokana isn't trying to be titillating. It is trying to tell a proper story. It's not trying to be pornography. So to suggest that titillation is a core part of the Aokana experience would not be accurate, I feel. What that does mean is that the fan service in the game, and you do get to see plenty of panties and risque humor in the Nintendo Switch version, is achieving much the same as the sex scenes in terms of what it contributes to the narrative. It's just at a lower impact level than the actual nudity and sex. But just like Neko Para, the game outside of those scenes isn't trying to be high impact. For the most part, it is a very lightly comedic romantic romp and coming-of-age story for the protagonist, who learns to come to terms with who he is and deal with some earlier trauma in his life. None of that is particularly hard-hitting. Therefore, again, the sex scenes, being hard-hitting pieces of content, aren't really necessary to enhance the overall narrative and what it's saying. So none of this is to suggest that the game actually needs to have those sex scenes in it. Aokana isn't transgressive like Seiya no Uta is, where the sex scenes stand in support of the transgression, nor is it something like Trouble Days, which is not a great game, but I do feel like it is pointless on the Switch because it is meant to be an actual sex comedy. Only on the Switch it lacks the sex, so it doesn't really make sense as a narrative anymore. I don't see any decline in the narrative of Aokana when it's played without the explicit sex, is the overall point I'm making here. Now, with all of that being said, people want what they want in the games that they play, and as far as the art goes, Aokana's sex scenes are particularly well drawn, so losing them from the game has pulled a lot of the raw creative energy that went into the game right out of it. Anecdotally, that is a difference between the game and the Nekopara titles. I really enjoy Nekopara, but catgirls aren't one of my fetishes, so I had no real desire to see that in the game anyway, so it didn't really matter to me that it was gone. On the other hand, there are certainly characters in Aokana that I was looking forward to seeing the fan servicey scenes in, because they are attractive characters, and obviously the sex scenes are a step further on that fan service scale. So I wouldn't have exactly protested the inclusion of those scenes in the game even if they didn't add anything meaningful to the actual narrative itself. So I did feel like, having gone back and seen the PC version and the stuff that was removed from the Switch, I do feel like the Switch version doesn't have everything in it, just in terms of the fan service side of things. But this is why it's a good thing that the adult version does exist for PC, on PC for people that want it, and visual novels are nice and light on the hardware, so most people will be able to play it even if they don't have a gaming PC and they just want to play an R18 rated visual novel. I'm certainly not suggesting that these games shouldn't exist, though I know, having recorded this video now, and from previous experience with people on this topic, there are some people that are going to interpret this video as me saying that this stuff shouldn't exist. This is the internet. But it's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that I don't necessarily agree with the position that many take, that an edited for console version of a game like Aokana is inherently inferior. An edited version of a game that makes sex a core theme to the narrative, such as Seiya no Uta, or an edited version of an actual pornographic game, such as Honey Select, would be largely pointless, and that's why I don't expect to ever see them on the Switch, nor do I necessarily think they should be there, since the removal of the sex content would compromise the thematic integrity of the experience right down to its core. With Aokana, though, it's really just a tangent that has been removed, and while you can argue that the tangent would be better in there, I guess, the base game is still there, the narrative is still there, it is still a complete package, and I think that is what is actually important here. Anyhow, that is enough for this video, I think. I'm sure that I'm going to get some comments for having recorded this. I do hope that people listen right through to the end and get a sense of what I'm really arguing for here. Like I said, it's something that I haven't realized that I've talked about on this. I haven't talked about this on the channel before, and I wanted to explore my thoughts on it because I do think that this is a topic that deserves some nuanced discussion and doesn't generally get it. People get very reactionary one way or the other to this stuff, and I don't think that really helps anybody, either side of the argument, to be honest. You can check out DDNet for my full review of Aokana on Switch. As you can see from this video, it is a gorgeous bit of art. It is a really lovely game, and I do think that most people that play it will enjoy it, whether they're aware of the R18 version or not. It's certainly got a really good response on Steam. It's a 10 out of 10 game, I think, from 1,200 reviews. So it's a very popular visual novel, and you can easily see why it immediately hooks you in from the very opening moments, and it is just beautiful to look at. But again, that's enough of this video. Go and read my review for my full thoughts there. Please do click on the like and subscribe button, because that way you won't miss any videos. I do publish a lot of them, you may have noticed. Please do consider backing me on Patreon if you enjoy my videos. because that backing, that support actually helps me to scale up what I'm doing here, and I do have some big plans for what I'd like to do with these videos, but I need to finance it first. If you would like to finance it in a different way, you can always grab the DD visual novels. And these are visual novels that I would not be putting to console at any point, because they have scenes in there that Nintendo would object to in a big way. So as you can see, I don't actually have an issue with the material that's in these R18 version games. I do it in my own games as well. But again, you know, I think that it's not entirely necessary in the context of games like Aokana to enjoy the game itself. Links for all of that stuff is in the description below in the video. If you have played this game, do let me know. If you play visual novels a lot, let me know. If you have different thoughts about adult material in games and whether it can be removed while maintaining the integrity of the game, do let me know that as well. Thank you as always for watching. I do appreciate it, and we will see you at the next video.